Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at Airfix's 1/48 scale Canadair Sabre. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So interestingly, we do not start in the cockpit for this kit, we actually start on the intakes. However, do note that these intakes do have a nice amount of ejector pin marks on them, which will need to be sanded out. However, I didn't realise this, if you don't want to actually sand them, there are supplied engine and intake covers in the kit, which I do actually use, so they do cover up the intake, so you don't have to sand them if you don't want to, but at this stage I was still pondering as to what I was going to do to it. So the two intake halves then snap together, and then the cockpit tub is cemented on top of this. Then I moved on to doing the ejection seat. In my humble opinion, the ejection seat, along with the rest of the cockpit, is incredibly under detailed. I mean, the chair looks like something, or seat, sorry, looks like something you can find in a coffee shop, and the rest of the cockpit just has near to no raised details, and it's disappointing because of the Sabre. Its canopy is like a bubble canopy, so you can see right into the cockpit, and you'd want to show off some incredible sort of nice details, but Airfix don't give you the tools to do this, which is a shame. On to some more positives. The general sort of mechanism for attaching the nose, not nose cone because it isn't really a cone, is it, but the air intake front and also the back, it's got some nice slotting mechanisms, as you can see me utilising here, which was quite nice that they're following in suit of manufacturers like Tamiya, who are quite commonly known for using these sort of methods. Once the required nose cone and also air intake cone at the back, which you saw me put on, was attached, I thought I would do a little bit of detail painting to the very under detailed cockpit. I didn't go over the top here because there was nothing for me to really paint. I also didn't use the supplied instrument panel decal just because I thought it would look a little bit nicer if I just painted it. So there was the final bit of painting. Then I gave it a nice little dry brush, and I was happy enough with the outcome. But you've already heard me rant on about how I feel it's under detailed, so maybe a little bit of room for improvement. Then on some figure painting, I coated Dave, I named him Dave, in Ammo's one-shot primer, and then I pretty much dusted some white from his top head just to reveal the highlights. Then I got a severely or highly thinned down olive drab sort of colour and then brushed it on top. The reason for painting the white from the top just gives you some tonal variations in the colour of the olive drab, so it's lighter and darker in some areas. Then I did a bit of detail painting on his little vest, and then that was pretty much it. And here was the final product of Dave looking very fashionable. Dave was then cemented into the cockpit for the rest of his life, poor Dave, but he looks quite good in there, and I'm sure he is very comfortable indeed. The only issue I have about Dave is the fact that both of his hands are actually on his knees, which if you wanted to display this kit in the flying configuration, you would have a little bit of an issue on the realism side of things. As you saw, the nose wheel gear bay, is built up on the underside of the intake, so this main intake is almost a sort of hub for a lot of sub-assemblies, but it fits together really nicely. It followed a very similar sort of assembly to my previous video with Tamiya's F16, which is not always nice to see because usually Tamiya get things right. So as you saw me struggling there with a couple of these panels, these are the air brakes for the kit. They all go in together quite nicely. They're pretty much just these panels for if you wanted to display the air brakes open, or you might have seen earlier in the video I was putting in the gun bay doors in as well. You can have these open and do a lot of detail. However, as you'll see, I have a big decal that goes over all of these, so I didn't really want to muck around with cutting out the decals. So the exhaust is then kind of slotted into the fuselage using some nice location tabs. These are, you can also see there's some more location tabs for the forward assembly with the cockpit tub and the intake. These work very nicely, as you will see. There's near to no sort of movement, and everything seems to kind of work in quite seamlessly, no pun intended. So the right hand side of the fuselage is then connected, and as you can see, generally quite a good fit. This will still require some work, as you will see in a second. However, the back sort of half, as you see here, is a little bit springy, and this does actually get the better of me, but we will cover that when we get to it. To sort out the seams, what I like to do is I like to run a bead of super glue along the seam, let it dry, and then sand it using, now very kindly gifted to me, Ammo's sanding stick. It has pretty much all different types of sanding grits, and you can just work up them and it gives you a really nice finish. However, when you are sanding, you will lose quite a few details, so to regain these details I use a bit of Tamiya's flexible masking tape, and then I just kind of line out where the panel line is. Then I use my little panel rescriber, which is pretty much just like a big drawing pin, and rescribe. After that was done, it was onto a couple more little elements which had to be put onto the main assembly. These all go together very nicely with nice location tabs and nice fitment all over. So the horizontal stabilizers on the Sabre are very iconic for having quite severe dihedral to them. Airfix provides some nice tabs at an angle to make sure you get this in the correct position. Moving on to the gear bay, it builds up very nicely indeed. There's no fitment issues. Airfix also interestingly provides you with one piece to blank out the underside of the gear bay, which is only useful if you are depicting this in flight. I must say the actual gear bay is quite detailed, however how I'm displaying it you won't see too much of it, but if you were going to do all of the doors and everything open, it would definitely detail up very nicely with a wash and maybe one or two wires added. So that was the gear bay all completed. I then moved on to assembling the top edges of the wing. So Airfix uses a really interesting method here where it's big tabs which then fit into corresponding holes and tabs on that other side. It works brilliantly. It works brilliantly, and it's brilliant areas to put your glue and make sure you have a strong fit. Because it's recessed, you can pull in a bunch of either extra thin or even Revel contactor, and it works very well. You then do this for the leading edge of the wing as well, and it's a brilliant system. After that, the fuselage is then connected to the wing. This was a really nice fit. I was a little bit worried that I was going to have to bring out the super glue again and do a little bit of blending in. However, it looks perfect. As you can see there, with a little bit of glue and a few clamps, that will be a really nice wing join. So my only complaint with this part of the build would probably be the inability to do anything with ailerons. Some kits, Airfix, they have done kits in the past where you have the ability to position the ailerons or flaperons in certain positions, and I personally quite like that because I think on the whole when aircraft are at rest there is a little bit of droopiness in their ailerons, and I like to depict that through my models. So then I'm just into the final closing stages of the assembly, pushing on items such as the canopy, which went together very nicely. To mask all of this off, I just used my usual sort of masking tape and then, kind of get a bit of a score, crease and cut. I've covered this so many times in other videos, so if you are interested, go and check one of those out. So with canopy masked, it was then time to go on to primer. I use Ammo One Shots primer. This time especially it had to be in black as I'm doing a bare metal finish. I tell you what I would really like though to have in Ammo's One Shot primer bottles is one of their mixing balls, which is in their dropper bottles. It just helps to make sure the paint is completely mixed before you start spraying. For the base metallic colour of this Sabre, I am going to be using AK's Extreme Metal colour range. I absolutely love these paints. These are my new go-to for metallic paint. So this was put on at about 25 psi and it was thinned in ratio, I think 60% paint to 40% thinner. They're already quite thinned or apparently pre-thinned. However, I just like to go a little bit over the top with the thinning. What I probably could have done here to make it look a little bit more shiny, as Sabres are very shiny, is do a gloss black base, as I know that definitely helps to make the metallic shine a little bit more. However, as we will get onto soon, it didn't really affect me that much, as it does end up as a matte finish. So when it comes to equipment and how I am spraying this, I am using Harder and Steenbeck Evolution, and I believe this is a 0.4 nozzle. I like to go with larger nozzles when spraying either metallics or also gloss varnishes. It just helps get a little bit of a more even sort of coat when you are doing it, compared to maybe a 0.2 or 0.15 nozzle. Other than that, there's not really too much to it, except for maybe just trying to not go over places where I've already painted already. This is just because you don't want to have uneven build-ups. So once I was happy with my base metallic colour, it was time to mask off 1 or 2 panels just to give them a different shade of a metallic colour. This is because when I was looking at a couple of reference images of the Sabre, especially its gun sort of port panel, and also these ailerons, they were a different type of metal apparently. So to do this, I just used a variety of ammo MIG metal colours. Here I think I was using steel on the ailerons, and then for the gun panel I used gunmetal, which is, you know, quite fitting. So this was then, as you can see, when it's being demasked or unmasked, it just has a slightly different tone to it, and it looks, you know, it adds a little bit of variation. However, right, unmasking, demasking, it was horrific for me with this. So look, this was the first bit which I pulled off, and then I went to pull off the rest of it, and look at the state of that. I've ripped off my metallic colour and my primer. So to sort this out, I got a bit of masking tape out. I pretty much masked over where the gun metal was, and then got my primer back out, went over it, continued this process to anywhere where a bit of paint had been ripped off, and then I got my original base colour back out, which was white aluminium, and just, you know, blended it back in. Not too much of an issue, however, it's extra work, isn't it? So in the future, maybe I'll put a gloss varnish down or something before I start masking off other panels. Or maybe I was just especially unlucky, because this is the second time something like this has happened to me when working with metallics, but we'll get into that on another video. So some more masking then took place. This time it was masking of the yellow sort of aspects of the Sabre. This was all done by eye. There were no measurements for this. However, once you know, it looks okay in the end. Because I was painting yellow, and yellow is notoriously a very transparent colour, you know, it will show up any defects in your paintwork, it will show up absolutely anything. So to give it a good base and make sure no metallic elements come through onto the yellow, I gave it a base coat of Insignia white. This was very, very carefully just dusted on, as I didn't want to have a huge build-up of paint and create a ridge along the masking tape line. So here it was, all painted up. I could then move on to the yellow. When it comes to yellow, I'm pretty sure I showed you the dropper bottle, but if you missed that, that was me using, I think, Limone from Ammo MIG. A really nice yellow colour. It's probably my favourite I've ever used. It's got a higher opacity than some other on the market. You might notice, and you'll see in a second once I take off the masking tape, that I didn't, you know, overdo on the masking tape, and I should have protected more of the metallic on the right hand side of the wing. I didn't mask this on purpose, just because I didn't want to have another issue like I previously had on the gun ports, where I had to, you know, sort of blend everything in. So I thought, you know what, I will just risk it for a biscuit, and you know, if there was any overspray, which there was, I will sort that out when I come to it. Here was the final yellow. I really like how this looks, especially the contrast from the metallic onto the yellow. However, it isn't just yellow on these bits, there are also these black outlines. So to do this, I had a linear piece of masking tape, Tamiya masking tape, which was kind of put along the edges, and then I would put another piece and bring it back off. Very similar to how I make or do my invasion stripe. So if you want to know how to do that, you can either watch my Airfix mosquito video or my Airfix Mark 9 Spitfire video, which has somehow got 90,000 views now, which is quite incredible. So once taking or demasking all of these, I was very happy to see that I haven't ripped off any more of the metallic paint. However, as you can kind of see very faintly, there is a bit of overspray of the yellow which had to be sorted out. This was just done by using the white aluminium and blending it back in, because the white aluminium is actually quite an opaque colour. So here was the final result with all the masking done. I was very happy with how it was looking at this stage. To seal everything in and prevent any more, you know, muck-ups with the metallics, I gave it about 1 or 2 coats, I think it was 2 in the end actually, of Vallejo's gloss varnish. This is thinned in about, I want to say 60 to 40 I think is what I went with. I've actually started to use this more than the Mr. Hobby stuff, firstly because I can't find any Mr. Hobby stuff in stock at the moment, and also it is a lot nicer on my airbrush, a lot less harsh. So my only tip that I can give you here is, once again, make sure you're spraying with a larger nozzle, and also make sure you're spraying at quite a high PSI. After the gloss varnish was all cured, all set, all lovely and dry, I went on to doing a couple of the gear elements. This was the gear bay doors and the actual gear. The gears have very solid location points, which, you know, you always want that with your kits, because having bad gear can honestly absolutely ruin a kit, or at least it definitely does for me. So on to looking at the wheels. These wheels quite nicely have some location tabs within, which make sure that you get the orientation of the wheel in the correct position to make sure that the weighted sort of indentation is in the right angle. So if you haven't already noticed, this Sabre is being done as an American Sabre, also very specifically as the Huff. These decals, my god, were they a pain. As you will see in this video, a lot of the decals were like this, and they had creased and maybe dried out, so they were in about 500 different little pieces and they ripped very easily. I managed to get them down, however it is definitely not my finest decal work. Look, there you go, the tail's just blooming come off. So yeah, definitely not my finest decal work, and to add to this, the decal kit didn't have any American insignias, which the Sabre has, so I had to go and grab them out of an Airfix Mustang kit. So if the insignias look a bit off, just go with it. Thank you very much. So once all of these decals were down, they were all sealed in using VMS's matte varnish. I know I probably should have used gloss, but all the decals looked a bit odd with all the weird gloss, so I just went with matte because I knew I could trust it. So a couple of little details before we go into the final finish. If you would like to see maybe a couple of these models, I do actually attend a model club, Tame Valley Model Club. I'll leave a link to them down below if you want to go and check out the website, and if you ever want to see maybe 1 or 2 of my models and several other brilliant models, they will all be at the club. So details to that down below. Furthermore, I'm trying out a new way of presenting the final model in this video, so tell me what you think of it. Do you like it? Do you prefer if it was just static photos? Do you prefer the music, no music? Just please do tell me what you think of it down below. Did you prefer the white background? Do you prefer the black background? It helps me know what you would rather see in the videos and how you would rather see the final product. So back onto the model, the final elements were just taking off the masking or the canopy masks, and also fitting the engine and air intake covers. I really quite like how those air intake covers look. I know it's maybe a little bit of Marmite, but yeah. So there it is. This has been my take on Airfix's 1/48 scale Sabre. I do hope you've enjoyed the video. There are several other videos on the channel if you would like to go and check them out. But anyway, that's enough from me. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye, guys.